Good afternoon, everyone. And I am Paul Donato, Chief Research Officer here at the ARF. Welcome to Proving the Power of Faster Market Mix Models, New Research, and Real-World Brand Stories. I'd like to thank this opportunity to thank OptiMine for sponsoring today's event. We're recording the event, and it will be available on our ARF website next week. Today's event includes a presentation by Matt Voda and Kelly Brady of OptiMine, followed by a short panel discussion. Please place your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll monitor them as we go through and try to answer as many as time will allow. I want to remind you we have the Audience Time Science Conference coming up to be held on March 18th and 19th at People Inc. in New York City. If you have not registered yet for this conference, it's our largest event, and you really should. March 18th and 19th at People in New York City, and we will explore some of the more urgent challenges and recent breakthroughs in audience measurement, including how AI is transforming media, advertising workflows, and risk management. We have a stellar lineup of speakers, including 3 keynotes. ARF is celebrating its 90th anniversary, literally this month, and we are kicking off the festivities at Audience Time Science. So go to our website and secure a spot now, and be sure to check the ARF website for all upcoming events. It is now my pleasure to introduce Matt Voda, General Manager of OptiMine. Matt brings deep experience in marketing, analytics, and SaaS technology to his role at OptiMine. Matt joined OptiMine from Optum, where he led a marketing and analytics group delivering transformative solutions to the healthcare market. Matt's career spans a broad set of product marketing and innovation roles in e-commerce, business intelligence, predictive analytics, and consumer marketing globally. Then we have Kelly Brady, Director of Client Success at OptiMine. In Kelly's current role, she serves as Strategic Marketing Leader in OptiMine's Client Success team. Here, she delivers media optimization guidance to her clients in the apparel and consumer electronic spaces, ultimately furthering brand and business goals. Before joining OptiMine, her experience spanned brand strategy, consumer insights, media planning and buying for some of the most storied, innovative brands. Please welcome Matt and Kelly.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Matt Voda, General Manager of OptiMine. And today we'll be talking about a key question that we get from many of the brands that we engage with. And that is, what is the right model refresh cadence for our brand, and how often should we update our models? And I think that brands know inherently that there's a lot of potential business performance riding on the answer to this question, and that faster, more frequent model refreshes are probably better, but how much better, and what are some of the trade-offs that come into play when doing so? So we're very excited to share our research and some real-world case studies today that address these questions. So let's jump in. Okay, so how fast and frequent is enough for your MMM model refresh? And before we answer that question, let's take a moment to define what a model refresh actually is. And I think there's some confusion in the market about what this is, so let's make it clear what we're talking about here. A model refresh is a full retrain, rescore, rebuild of models. And typically, when doing that, you're taking the latest marketing conversion data from the period since the last model refresh, and you're bringing that in as an update to the model itself. And what it isn't is scoring new data with existing models and coefficients. That's just using an existing model and just putting new data through it. And it typically isn't rebuilding of models with the same data. So what we're talking about in terms of a refresh is a fully new set of models with up to date data, both in terms of marketing conversion and market inputs. So we'll be using that in our definition in our discussion today. Okay, so why should we care about any of this? Well, let's make a few assumptions, which I think you'll agree aren't terribly risky. The first is that the predictive power of your MMM model degrades over time. So, what was true in the past doesn't necessarily hold up over time. Things change, and the model will degrade in terms of its predictive power. The second assumption is that as a result of that degradation, the brand will lose business potential. So, meaning the brand's decision quality will suffer, business results will be impacted because decisions are being made using a model that is less predictive, less accurate in terms of kind of current state. So we assume that as a model degrades, we lose business performance, or at the very least, we lose performance potential. We miss opportunities when we make decisions with an old, stale model. And again, if you're stuck with slow MMM refresh rates, I think this is the main risk as a brand. So I always like to begin with a question: is that if we started with our ideal state, what would that look like? And I think Valhalla in this case would be a model refresh cadence that would align with some acceptable kind of minimal level of degradation that lines up with the pace that you're making with your budget decisions, and where just as predictive power starts to decline, ideally we'd refresh the models to pick it back up to an optimal level, and we'd repeat that process over time so that we're maintaining kind of a minimum floor in terms of decision quality loss. And therefore business performance is maintained at a high level because we always have a current kind of most up-to-date, most accurate set of decisioning guidance. And so this was the question we started with as our data science team began building an experimental approach. Is what is this magic cadence, and does it vary by industry? How much variability is there? So before we get into our own research, it's important to kind of ground this in terms of what the industry is already signaling. The push towards faster MMM refresh rates is coming, directly from the buy side. Certainly, the IAB just came out with a report a couple of weeks ago. Their state of data report's an annual report that talks about the state of data, in this case, state of measurement and data creating some delays. There's a lot of market frustration in terms of the slow measurement, and 2/3 of the market said that they've seen issues with the timeliness, trust, and efficiency of measurement. And On the flip side, though, the market is actually pretty hopeful that things will get faster with the expectation that MMMs will run 2 to 3 times more frequent than they do today with an eventual shift to monthly refreshes. And this mirrors our own observations at OptiMine with the brands that we work with. They want to move faster, whether it's because their markets are evolving rapidly or they need to be more competitive with the decisions that keep them apace at the market or ahead of their own competitors. So there's a lot of focus when brands come to us, for our initial work that they want to shift from more traditional approaches that are too slow for their own market and own competitiveness. So these issues and questions led us to conduct our own research. And it's a project that we started last year with our own data science group here at OptiMine. And we attempted to answer this question with that research. And our data science team designed an experimental approach which allowed us to compare model degradation and various model refresh intervals. So if we could take a look at refreshes at different intervals and different pacing, what was the degradation? And we pulled together brands in a sample that allowed us a good kind of representative point of view. And mainly, this was about, did we have enough history with the brand? And importantly, were we already running a rapid MMM refresh? And you'll see why this is critical in a moment. But we needed to start with a baseline where brands were already refreshing monthly to give us a good baseline. And then, of course, we needed some data stability, and we needed a whole lot of computational resources to run these experiments. And then once everything was designed, the team then built some special tools and some automation to run these experiments. Because as you know, if you have analytics folks or you are in analytics yourself, you've got day jobs, and like most data science groups, you're probably extremely busy and have probably a pretty big backlog. So we wanted to be able to do this as efficiently as we could internally. And frankly, I think that's probably why nobody apparently that we've seen has ever done this kind of research before, because it's relatively expensive to do, and it's a fair amount of work. Fair amount of work for us. It took the team about 6 months from start to finish. Okay, so how exactly did this work? We took brands that were on a regular monthly MMM refresh cadence and had been doing so for several years. And this gave us a test bed to use where we could go back in time and use actual business results to see how the predictions held up over time. And that's exactly what we did. We built an initial model, then used it to create an optimized media budget allocation for go-forward use, saw how that held up, and then we shifted the next model refresh out by a month, and then another month, and so on and so forth, to compare how the guidance of each of those successive model refreshes actually compared to actual results. And this allowed us then to really look at how did models hold up over time? How did they degrade? What was kind of the precision as we stretched out that period of time in between successive model runs. And we could see the model degradation over time in 1 month increments then to see what the drop-off was in real terms. The data science lead running this project came up for air partway through the project and showed this degradation curve. And this was from the first brand in the sample set that we ran. And frankly, it was almost exactly what I expected to see. You see some immediate degradation, about 10%, and then as you march further out with time, the degradation really starts to drop. And so I'm guessing many of you here today probably expected to see the same curve. And so this was first sample, first set of runs with the first brand in the collection. And then the team went back to work, expanded the sample across several more brands, conducted many more runs. And the answer, as it turns out, changed quite a bit with successive sample runs. And the pattern didn't hold. And the more runs we ran through, the more, frankly, the more random things got. And some months had lower degradation for some brands. Degradation was substantial. And there didn't seem to be any pattern at all when we rolled this up in aggregate. And the histogram see here shows different bands of model degradation and a sense for kind of relatively how frequent that degradation occurred. Um, and what the data showed as a result of the research was that there wasn't necessarily a linear relationship with the model degradation and the number of months between model refreshes. And of course, there were some longer periods that had higher degradation, which you'd expect. But there were also some shorter ones too. So I think the answer really was that the degradation was quite unpredictable, which is kind of a dangerous place to be as a brand. You don't know how much your decisions are off, or if they are off at all. But they could be off by an enormous amount, especially if you don't refresh all that often. And we saw some cases where it could be north of 50% or more. And we think there's some good explanations for that. But again, the risk here is that you don't know when your model's kind of running off the rails, and that's a key risk point that was surfaced by the research. And in retrospect, we probably should never have assumed that there'd be a perfectly linear relationship here because all sorts of things change over time on the ground. Where the rubber hits the road from a marketing execution standpoint, that marketing is always changing. Teams, agency partners are constantly fiddling, which is a good thing. Usually, creatives change. Certainly, consumer behaviors are always changing with economic pressures, trends, and then certainly competitive pressures come into play as well. And so I don't think we'd expect this to be a real constant, stable kind of bed for modeling. And so we shouldn't be surprised that there is this type of variation. And our models, even though they allow us to plan for future possibilities, are still really only rear view mirrors. And I think about that in our own industry. Some assumptions about MMM. I constantly hear industry leaders state that MMM is quote unquote the slow once or twice per year strategic guide, as if that were somehow kind of etched in stone that it has to be that way. And therefore that's just kind of what we have to live with as an industry. And we know that this is kind of a poor and risky assumption about MMM, that it can only be updated a few times per year, which is just not true. And that kind of thinking or those types of assumptions have major business risks associated with them. So I'm going to pause here and we're going to take a poll here, audience interaction. There should be a pop-up window here. And the question is, are you happy with how often your brand is refreshing your MMM? Yes, no, I wish we could refresh more often, not sure, maybe don't even have an MMM. So we'll give this a few seconds for the audience to answer. And the answer is bouncing around. I will add, I'm surprised if you were really happy with your model refreshes that you showed up today. I expected most people to say no, a little self-selection just in terms of your interest in this webinar. So it looks like about half of you are happy and about half of you are not. Either you wish you could refresh more often or you're not sure. So thanks for those responses. So it's almost 50-50. All right. And then we have one more poll question quickly. For those of you that are actually running MMMs, how often are you refreshing? So the first answer is 1 to 2 times per year. Second is up to 4 times a year. Some of you may be going monthly or more. And the last answer is maybe you don't know. Or again, maybe you don't have MMM. So we'll give this a few seconds for folks to respond. All right. So this is somewhat evenly distributed. So about 36% of you, a third of you are refreshing once or twice a year. Another 27% are at 4 times a year. Only 11% are refreshing monthly. That's kind of interesting. And then we've got the remainder of folks that are not sure. All right. I think again, I expected to see most people refreshing once or twice a year, and we know certainly from the IAB's report, this is where a lot of brands are still stuck. Kind of they talk about it in terms of their annual MMM study. Maybe you're updating a couple times a year. That's kind of what we expected, and that's what we see when brands come to us as well. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Brady, who's going to talk about some real world kind of case studies and also some considerations in terms of the decisions that a brand would think about in terms of, its transition to more frequent model refreshes. So Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. All right. So, yes, as Matt mentioned, we're going to talk through just some benefits, trade-offs of more frequent refreshes as somebody who speaks to clients every day. I've really seen a lot of this in action. So, I'm excited to share kind of pros and cons of fast, slow refreshes and kind of what some of our clients have had to go through. So first off here, there are, of course, so many trade-offs. We put together kind of a short list of some potential upsides and downsides when you're looking at kind of balancing speed, actionability, and really being able to implement these. So on the one hand, brands who are refreshing their models monthly and quarterly are able to stay current with a lot of consumer behaviors, keep up with competition, training models on data only a couple of weeks really after the close of a fiscal month or quarter is a really kind of positive that a lot of our clients have seen. Speed and frequency of refreshes also allows for marketing strategy and tactical changes to be inputted into models to get a read on their efficiency and their effectiveness really quickly. We're also able to integrate market conditions, as Matt mentioned. We've got a lot of macroeconomic signals in our models that kind of control for what's happening outside of the everyday consumer kind of and marketing space. So things like CPI, tariffs, interest rates. We know that those have a really heavy impact on how consumers spend. So we want to make sure we're not missing out on that. And because those can change relatively frequently, we wouldn't want decisions to be made on some of those factors that may be outdated. We also know that providing timely guidance in general to internal teams is important so that there's really confidence when it comes to presenting to internal stakeholders and making those kind of decisions there. And overall, this is directly related to just improving overall business performance so that everyone can feel really confident and those recommendations of action. And then, like a lot of things, there are considerations. So over on the right-hand side, we're under no illusion that faster refreshes are possible in every organization. While that is the North Star to get to a 4, 6, 12 per year, teams should be aware of what some of those trade-offs are. So, first and foremost is, there can be a strain on data and IT teams to collect and validate transmit data, QA, and a lot of teams can honestly struggle if resources are not available to kind of continue that monthly or quarterly drumbeat. There's also a cost that goes without saying to run models more frequently. As Matt mentioned, a full retrain, rescore can, take time and money and resources. But, as we talked about on the left, I think in general, those trade-offs are kind of seen as a more positive there. We've also kind of heard about overfitting noise and, potential history window of inertia as being potential downsides. I will say that OptiMine has come up with some creative ways around each of these. And so we do have, we can speak afterward and would be open to questions around that as well. And then finally, potential of, misaligned guidance, decision timing as well. And then, uh, a final downside here, I think, is, what do we do if and when answers change? This can, be a little bit of a pain point for some brands who may be new to MMM who expect history to be static. Because our models are dynamic, we are always making sure that the most recent data is actioned off of. And again, we do have some creative ways to turn that downside into upside. So with that as kind of a level set there as a foundation, we wanted to next talk through kind of a range of refreshes that our clients do have and talk about why faster, actually has some strong business impacts. So in faster paced retail environments in particular, 1 to 2 times per year simply is just not enough to fully, retrain and rescore a model. Those who tend to lean more frequently tend to be in that kind of, e-com, in-store, whether it's apparel, electronics, really anything where, daily, weekly, monthly sales can, ebb and flow with, seasons. These also tend to be businesses with more resources to dedicate around not only data collection, validation, but can also be organized enough for speed and accuracy on a kind of more quick pace each month or quarter. So when models are privy to the most recent set of inputs, whether that's the most recent month or quarter, our experience is that, that sets up everybody for success on the brand, the marketing, finance side in two really key ways. The first is operational alignment. Second is strategic marketing execution. Frequent and consistent readouts with internal stakeholders and senior leadership is really crucial for ongoing confidence and necessary face time with those who need to know how marketing decisions are impacting business outcomes. And the second is that strategic marketing execution, up-to-date insights on, how effective a campaign is, how efficient it is, where investments should be shifting across funnels, channels, campaigns, mean that those future decisions are really rooted in the most recent incremental results that all teams are, kind of worth believing in. So I want to dive into the first pillar, which is that operational alignment, and why more frequent refreshes can really work. So when internal folks are two heads down for too long, we've seen that they can lack the knowledge that comes from insights across the organization, led by marketing and analytics. Most of our everyday clients have some sort of, MBR, QBR, some sort of business reviews in place where representatives across finance, marketing, brand, business ops gather and talk through recent business performance. And our MMM is a really strong backbone for those conversations. Leadership gains the tools they need to set strategic priorities together on a very consistent basis. And I've added some common business and marketing questions that are easily answered in these types of business reviews. So some examples are, how much marketing driven revenue and new customers did our brand see last month? How does that compare year over year? Did we meet our goals for the month? Are we on track for the rest of the year? And should there be any major adjustments for the rest of the year based on these results? And here we've got some real world examples of some clients across OptiMine where these metrics are inputs to these meetings. So really clear marketing driven revenue and new customers were added last month. And those figures were up year over year due to more efficient spend within higher performing channels, while also right sizing budgets. Goals have been met for the month based on marketing driving a stronger portion of overall conversions and even over delivered for the client based on their earlier estimates. And finally, due to the recency of stronger performance among certain channels and funnels, mid and upper funnel, some of those ended up seeing a boost to their budget at the expense of lower. And that was, on a true incrementality metric, really gave the team confidence to start to make some more adjustments at the budget level. So these are the types of insights that are really key, I think, for leadership to get a high level pulse on how marketing is performing while also not getting too bogged down into the details. And so that's kind of that higher level step number one here. And as we move into the second outcome of more frequent refreshes, this relates more to kind of on the ground, both strategic and tactical marketing execution. So this allows for up-to-date insights on, campaign effectiveness, efficiency, investment shifts across funnels and tactics. So when models are refreshed more often, we've seen that marketing and media teams and their agency partners can feel more confident in the adjustments that they're making, really based on some initial campaign performance without either needing to wait for more data or relying solely on MTA or last touch or direct from platform. And put in action faster MMM answers questions like, is that new affiliate partner worth the higher CPM or CPC? Are they really incremental to the business? Or were influencer events last quarter really worth it? Did they end up moving the needle at all in our MMM? And more broadly, how efficient are we at driving incremental revenue? Is this trending positively this year versus last year? And who's leading the pack? And so clear insights here are derived for a lot of folks across client media teams, channel owners, and agencies with the assistance of analysts here at OptiMine. We have revealed that, there's a lot of yeses down the board for this client in particular, that the new affiliate partner, really was worth the money. Even though they're a bit higher, we would recommend continuing with them and seeing if that high performance does continue. As well as getting a pulse on influencer events. So in this particular case, we ended up seeing a lift from some of those events, even though they, in many cases, were targeted to DMAs around the US. That national boost of that influencer, posting on their own channels, we could see in our MMM was moving the needle. And so we would, again, recommend things like continuing them, every few months, especially when that support is, relatively inexpensive and that support is available. And then number three, answering the question, are we efficient at a top line at driving revenue with media? And in this case, again, yes, the brand's ROAS here was above their kind of benchmark for across all channels on about 5% more spend this year. The brand ended up driving 7% higher revenue. So on a year-over-year basis, trending in a really strong direction, especially with so many headwinds in the economic system. So again, we recommend a shift in budget, in particular across a number of channels. Digital video we had seen was past saturation. Into awareness channels, we wanted to make sure that we're really priming that pump to get some more incremental conversions down the road. So again, these types of scenarios and insights are key for alignment across teams, channels, strategy, execution, so that everybody is kind of making decisions off of the same and most recent set of information. And we actually have a bonus case to highlight as a client of ours more recently was shared. They ended up achieving both of these very succinctly and successfully. So I wanted to talk through that here. So following along this timeline of a housewares retailer of ours, in month one, they launched a new brand campaign, and they told us that they simply could not wait 6 months to see if the results were coming in from traffic and sales. So because they're on a monthly cadence, we were able to relatively quickly give them an answer on, how that new brand campaign was performing. And so they needed to know if any dollars should be shifting around next month based on kind of the partners and the platforms that were, chosen based on even initial performance within the first, month or two. So by month three, we could help them understand that marketing was relatively successful in making the case to leadership for even increased dollars with some select partners who were more efficient, more effective at driving some conversions specifically from that new brand campaign. So because this retailer has seen some general historical struggles, especially in a higher level brand space, our insights to action help them hone in on partners that drove that best incremental lift and not just last click, bottom of the funnel sales. So, to wrap things up a little bit from my side, we just want to leave you with a few thoughts. So, as your brand goes down the path of refresh frequency decisions, we'd like you to consider both the trade offs and weigh the upsides. While there are some downsides like time, resources, data availability, and even cost, a lot of our clients end up choosing a higher frequency of refreshes so that they can continue to stay ahead of competition, ensure that models are most up to date with the most recent consumer behaviors in mind, and that ever changing economic environment is taken into account. Ultimately, improving business performance that proliferates across the organization for better decision making. Okay, I think we're going to turn it back and do some Q&A.
Very good. And I will be joining you right now. So we do have a couple of questions from the floor. Let's start out with one from Lisa. Goes back to the start of the presentation. How is degradation measured exactly? Is it a percentage? What's the numerator? What's the denominator?
Yeah, what we looked at was essentially model or prediction error. So if you run a model refresh in January, how does that hold up if you wait until June? When again, we did this historically, so we knew what the actual answer was in June, and so it was kind of model error, and that tells us how much the kind of prediction accuracy has degraded at each kind of window of refresh cadence.
Perfect. And Lisa has not a question but a comment, but it leads into another question, so it's a great segue. I'm happy. Lisa says, I'm happy with the number of refreshes per year. I think we could save resources by refreshing less often for some brand country combos. And that leads to a question that we discussed previously, and that is there a difference by industry? Are there industries that should refresh more often, and are there industries in which it's okay not to refresh as much?
Yeah, so there's a couple elements there. We certainly see more pressure in retail to refresh faster and more frequently. A lot more dynamic, kind of a very competitive space. And I compare that maybe to maybe financial services as an example. It might be a little more stable, although it depends on what's happening in the macroeconomic environment. CPG might be a little more stable. But the main point here that this research suggests is that you don't know when your model has kind of gone off the rails, if you will. And so you can assume maybe a more comfortable stance, but I think that's maybe a risky assumption to make. And so there's a real cost and a kind of a risk downside in just being too comfortable with your current cadence.
Got it. And the questions keep coming in, so I'd encourage anybody who has one to go to the Q&A box. We have from Aiden. Apart from cost and other implications you mentioned, when it comes to more frequent updates, how is data latency dealt with? For example, offline media lags a bit, and therefore the monthly updates may also lag if we're waiting for that data to come in.
Kelly, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, so something like, traditional TV or out of home, we, use what we have available at the time. And the great thing about being able to update, every month or quarter is that we can, retroactively replace that data with actuals. So when there's estimates in advance, we can add those into the model and then see how things change once actuals are available. A second way, to answer that would be, we set up our models in a way that takes into account kind of short, medium, and long-term effects of those media. So when there are longer lags in advance that we've already decided, like a TV or out of home, some upper funnel, we allow their influence out much farther than something that's meant to have an impact much shorter. So both in the model structure, we take care of that, as well as being able to kind of replace historical data when actuals are available.
Cool. And the questions keep arising, always a sign of a interesting presentation. So Mosley says, would you consider market mix modeling with dynamic parameters to allow for the effectiveness of marketing instruments to slowly evolve instead of changing them from one refresh to the next?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So the parameters are always dynamic. If you're taking in the latest marketing history and converting activity, and then a whole panel of what we would consider exogenous factors like weather, competitive elements, seasonality, the economy, pricing, promotions, inventory. There's a whole slew of kind of non-marketing factors that are brought into the model. Those are always dynamic, and always changing. And so I think you shouldn't assume that those evolve slowly. It should just be actuals. You should always be updating the model based on kind of real world conditions that are expressed in the data. I'm not sure I've answered the question completely, but I think the important point here is that these inputs into the model are always dynamic, always changing.
Got it. Yeah, I think what he's really asking is whether or not there's a way to sort of govern the rate of change as a consequence. Seems like some of the questions, some of the discussion about this has to do with calming senior management when one month to the next it could upset people. Maybe if you thought about it that way,
Yeah.
a governed MMM.
I will tell you, I would love to govern the economy and the real world, but nobody can. So let's just set that aside for a moment. This gets to a point that Kelly made earlier in the presentation. Uh, it- Sometimes we'll surface an answer that changes. And there are some folks within brands that view that as a negative. And that is not a negative outcome. That is a signal that something has changed, either in terms of your execution or in the market or with the way consumers are behaving with your brand that you want to know and to be able to take advantage of. So, the person in paid social who sees that a particular campaign in Facebook suddenly performance drops, that's a good thing to identify and to know, but it's a little counterintuitive and it can be an uncomfortable place to be as someone who's accountable for their performance. And so we guide away from kind of damping these effects. You want to know when there's been a real change and investigate it, test it, and look at the model deeply. Because if it's real, that's incredibly important intelligence, and you will only perform better when you're fully armed with that type of insight.
Good. We have a technical question. For the refresh, does this mainly concern updating the coefficients, or did you consider something like new variable selection for the model?
Oh, they maybe missed the first slide. When we talk about a refresh, we're talking about a full
Right.
retrain, rescore. These are totally new models with new variable selection. Is it?
Very good. Shining has a compliment. Great presentation. You mentioned that OptiMine has come up with ways to avoid overfitting noise and overcoming history inertia. Can you speak a little bit more to both of those?
Yeah, it's an hour-long deep dive topic on its own. I'll give some high level answers. And hello, Shining. Good to see your name on the screen. Um, uh, there's a whole set of regularization that's involved here, and that's data science that isn't necessarily new. But there's a whole kind of category of data science around regularization and parameterization that is involved. There's a fair amount of overfitting prevention around some nonlinear kind of concepts. There's a whole class of data science around overfitting prevention. Vapnik and others have published a lot of institutional research around that is brought into this. There's even variable selection, kind of more Bayesian variable selection approaches. You can, when you have a tie, if you will, in a model, you have a decision to make about where you assign credit. And there are some approaches that are kind of safer to the business in terms of that decision when you have kind of a statistical tie, if you will. So there's a whole class of kind of approaches to avoid kind of overfitting noise and overfitting kind of spurious relationships in the data.
Got it. This might go back to the coefficient question in your first slide. But are we still talking regression as the
Yes.
primary driver of market mix models today?
Yeah. MMM, at its core is typically a regression-based approach. Yep.
Got it. Let's see, you mentioned influencer. In terms of selecting new variables, I'm curious about influencer and I'm curious about, I call it market quality, not market, but metric quality, call it attention. What do you see those variables? How do you include influencer in? What's that data look like?
And Paul, when you say influencer, are you talking about like the modern TikTok
Yeah,
version of an
yeah.
influencer or?
That's the way I interpret it. Maybe that's not what you were talking
Okay.
about.
Kelly, you want to take that one? You probably have a lot of examples from the clients you work with on that one.
I do. Yeah. So great question, Paul. I think influencers, first off, our models are trying to be as agnostic as possible about what an impression is, right? So we eyeball regardless of if it's a billboard or an influencer or a paid social post are all kind of one. Although we do treat them slightly differently once we choose their, model roles and all those types of things. So what we first do is we just set kind of how we believe that influencer should have an effect. Is it meant to have a more immediate, so a short term, medium, or long term effect? We run a model, we test it, and we kind of share it back with the client and say, does this, first off, feel right? Do you have external tests or direct information from these influencers that say, how efficient or effective they are? And then we try to kind of calibrate from there. But most of my clients do have their influencer partnerships represented somewhat in the MMM so that they can more accurately weigh them against more traditional channels.
And what's the variable? Is it like followers? Is it shares? Is it likes?
Yeah, it's a combination. I think a lot of my clients actually treat them slightly differently. So it could be some calculation off of followers or posts per month or kind of reach that they report back to. And we, hone in on what makes the most sense, whether it's a post or a reel or a video or, how many per day. So there's a quite a bit of human and judgment as part of deciding what the quite the right metric is to make sure it's as apples to apples with a TV ad.
Got it. Perfect. Well, we're at time. I'm very pleased to say there have been no questions about artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So I do want to thank you, Matt and Kelly, for a very engaging and insightful conversation. And thanks to OptiMine for sponsoring today's studio. Be sure to check the ARF website for all upcoming events. There'll be a brief two-question poll popping up at the end of the survey. It really helps us to program these events and then enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye, all.
Thank you.
Take care.